So what I've tried to outline in this book is the idea that there are a radically limited number of self-sustaining and improving principles. And that's something like a natural law. It's something like there's a universe of games. Some of them are playable and some of them aren't. Non-playable games are much more common. Games that will defeat themselves that no one wants to play. Then there's a fraction of games that are playable. So people will do them voluntarily and they'll iterate. Then there's a smaller fraction that iterate and improve. There's even a smaller fraction that iterate and improve multi-generationally. Well, the biblical stories capture the spirit of the iterated game that improves over centuries. And I think accurately. I think one of the cases I try to make in this book, you might say, well, what's the alternative to power? And that's fairly clear. Voluntary sacrifice is the alternative to power. And that's why the biblical texts concentrate on sacrifice. So what do you mean? What does sacrifice mean? What do you give up to be married? Yeah. What do you give up to have a friend? What do you give up to have a community? If it's all about you, you give up nothing. But if it's all about you, you don't have a community. So obviously the community is predicated on sacrifice. Once you know that, you think, okay, what's the sacrifice? Well, that's the question. That's the same question as what's the nature of life? What's the nature of work? What's the principle of community? Like the example you gave with the stranger in the stream and the dog. What do you sacrifice? The dog, right? Your attachment to the dog, your juvenile sentimentality, right? Maybe even your hatred. What if it's an enemy in the stream? What if it's the bully who made your life miserable or your dog? It's like, what do? You rescue the bully. Why? That's a hard question. The answer to that is something like, if you don't rescue the bully, the world turns into hell. It's something like that. And you think, well, that's not obvious. It's like, well, yeah, that's for sure. It's not obvious, but your conscience will tell you that. And so, yeah. So how did we get into this? Well, we were trying to figure out what had gone wrong, at a fundamental level. And then we switched into this discussion of deeper things. Yes.
Add something to what I'm hearing is that we all have a filter because we can't process everything.
Yes, that's the thing.
I'm watching you. I see the pink shirt that matches mine, but a tie that I'm not wearing.
Great choice of shirts.
Exactly. Thank you. But there's a lot that even when you speak, I'm hearing some things that you're saying clearer to me.
Definitely.
And others feel like, Charlie Brown, Lucy.
Yeah.
And so that's all of us do that. It's not even disrespectful. It's just some ideas will resonate with us.
Yes.
The story that I shared that I was told about the pet versus your pet, beloved pet versus some stranger who might not even be a good person is a story some people will hear and remember for the rest of their life. Others are going to not even understand it the first time.
Yeah.
And there's a spectrum in between there. So I think a lot of our political differences are caused by that. We tend, not only are we served different news feeds, I get all that. That's been said many times. But even if you were hear the same news feed, your interpretation of it is very different depending on the stories that you believe and the story that you think you're in.
Yeah. And the stories that are at the foundation of the structure through which you look at the world.
So in therapy, as you try to work with people like me and everybody else on the planet, I've been told that you challenge us with this concept of complementarity, which was originally a physics idea, Niels Bohr. The idea that you could have particle theory and wave theory, and they could both be true. They're on the surface opposites. Matter is a particle, matter is a wave. But in reality, it's waves and particles. The particles act like waves, and so Niels Bohr could hold both of these concepts in his mind at once without breaking.
When Carl Jung was working out his principle of complementarity with regards to unconscious function, he was also having a dialogue with one of the world's most famous physicists. So, in fact, one of Jung's books, which I think it's either Alchemical Studies or Psychology and Alchemy, is actually a library of dreams that this physicist dreamed up at the moment. And he was one of the physicists who worked on the principle of complementarity. And at the moment, unfortunately, his name has escaped me. Pauli. Wolfgang Pauli. Yes.
So let me just share with folks at home. So this is so typical. We're in a conversation. Jordan is tolerating me. He wants to talk to my wife. He was just yelling out the answers to the questions that he has in his mind that he can't articulate.
Yes.
So usually
Yes.
when we're together, I go to bed around midnight, which is late for me because I'm a surgeon. You stay up at least until dawn, debating Jung and other realities that aren't so obvious to others. So
Yeah. So this the complementarity idea too is part of that does lay out the landscape of the dream, because Jung's idea, for example, was that you'll have an ideological framework, let's say, but it keeps things out. That's relevant to your discussion of this filtering mechanism. But there's part of you that keeps track of what you're not paying attention to, because you pay attention to very little and you don't pay attention to a lot. And if what you're paying attention to is misaligned, you need, what would you say? You need a repository of alternative potential conceptualizations, and that's fleshed out in the landscape of dream and fantasy. Yeah, it's a brilliant idea. I'm certain it's right. It maps very nicely onto the hemispheric theories.
part of the question becomes, how do we realign Western society to at least begin to focus on things all of us believe are worthy of our attention?
Yes.
And the stories that we're telling are ones of nihilism,
Yeah.
of
Power,
of a power, of a
hedonism,
of a patriarchy that has
nature
failed us,
worship.
replacing a humanistic God with nature.
Well, even the dog rescue is an example of that, right? Because that's putting the animal above the human in the hierarchy of values. You might say, well, I love the dog. It's like, you're missing the point. You're missing the point. It's not about what you love. That's not the point. That's too focused on you. Why shouldn't it be focused on me? Well, the simple reason is, if everything's focused on you, subjective identity. If your identity is radically subjective, no one is going to want to be around you, right? The degree to which any of us is tolerable to other people, let alone welcome, is directly dependent on how much of our own individual whim and power, drive, let's say, that we sacrifice to the relationship. Obviously, that we know that with children. 2-year-olds can't do that. And so they don't have friends. They're still too egocentric. 3-year-olds start to learn to do that. And the 3-year-olds that are expert at that by 4 are desirable play partners, and they're socialized by their peers properly for the rest of their lives. Yeah. And now we're reverting, we're telling all our young kids, it's like, act like a 2-year-old. Define yourself subjectively, right? It's about who you think you are. Well, it even begs a question. It's like, what part of you do you think is you? Right? Like, it's your immediate hedonistic whim. That's you. What I want, what I feel. Right? Well, no one's going to be able to tolerate you. Obviously. They'll just walk around you. They'll find someone else. Why wouldn't they?